Video games have come a long way. I mean, who would have thought that just a few decades after the release of Donkey Kong, we'd almost be at the point of full-on virtual reality? Purely technical advances aside, games have also advanced as a storytelling medium, just as film has. Gone are the days of having to read a manual to fully grasp the intricate and convoluted lore that is the world of Kid Icarus. Now, simply playing the game allows us to dive right in. We now have these captivating, really genuine pieces of entertainment that, because of the high level of user engagement, prolong the player's interest far beyond the time period in which they're actually playing. It's what spawns so many theories, inspired works, and fan fictions. For the past 10 or so years, a lot of AAA game developers have really struggled to find a suitable balance between keeping their games cinematic and player-focused. If you intend to create a convincing fictional narrative and universe in a game that allows the player to still feel fully in control, you're going to need quite a bit of precision. Developers of these thorough and story-driven works walk a very fine line between dull gameplay and interactive movie, and while a lot fail, there are some that succeed, and The Last of Us is a prime example of this figurative balancing act. Naughty Dog's The Last of Us is not a new topic of discussion. For over 2 years now, critics have been praising the game for being immersive and realistic. But aside from acknowledging that the aesthetics and tone of the world are believable, there are countless contributing factors that we can pick apart. Let's take a look at some of the aspects that make it feel so authentic to critics and casual audiences alike. There are a lot of games that take part in the whole post-apocalyptic niche, but aside from decaying cities and overgrown houses, there are plenty of other ways to reinforce setting via gameplay. Design is deliberate. Developers put everything in their game for one main reason: to add to the intended player experience. Having obvious, if not intrusive, indicators as to where you can find resources in a desolate land is not very convincing, and such lack of subtlety creates a boundary between the player's investment and the in-game events. The minds behind The Last of Us were aware of this issue while designing the game, and their precautions to prevent replicating this unfortunate barrier can be seen through supplementary accessories to the world, including purposefully placed empty drawers, misleading areas, and plenty of other red herrings just to add to the plausibility of scavenging a world that's been dead for decades. Through this, they managed to strike a very fine balance between disappointment and satisfaction. The player learns to expect the worst, yet hope for the best, and when the desired outcome of a situation is there, it's really there. The player's mindset can effectively be based within the context of the game, rather than from the perspective of someone observing from the outside. Let's say that the player is searching for supplies, but alas, none to be found. The player may not think, that was a waste of my time, but possibly, darn, I could really have used some ammo. I hope some turns up soon. Setbacks seem to enhance gameplay as character-building challenges, rather than arbitrary booby traps set by too clever game devs. The Last of Us implements commonplace video game elements in ways that are relevant to the context, making the game seem like a cohesive experience rather than a formulaic set of challenges. The Bloater, a boss battle, illustrates this well. It incorporates many tropes of a classic boss battle, such as apparent attack patterns and commanding lesser minion enemies, but the game doesn't explicitly declare that it is a boss battle. The sequence is introduced as a progression of the already established scenario rather than a new ordeal, and the player is left very little time to process that this is a boss character. Minimal formal introduction or direction is given as to what this is or how it can be defeated. Victory is based solely on the player's prior knowledge of how to overcome enemies. Compare this to many boss battles from older games, where bosses were a much larger affair and they required a significant deviation in basic gameplay. This Bloater character is just an evolution of the boss archetype, embedded as a segment of the tale. Now, as we all probably know by this point, this is not a lighthearted game. The story isn't just really depressing, it's also really disturbing and really unpredictable, which tends to keep the player on edge. Due to the aforementioned techniques in which the game draws you into its universe, fairly common aspects of adventure games, like the acquisition of a new item, are morphed to fit the tense and bleak tone. For instance, in The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, the opening of a chest is designed to evoke excitement and a sense of satisfaction. The chests are brightly colored and draw the player's attention, and once opened, emit a gratifying jingle that makes the player associate in-game progression with more ways to have fun. In The Last of Us, finding a new item of equal significance to that item in Zelda relative to the scenario is less of an explosive satisfaction. It's more comforting than exciting. Now you just have a little bit more leeway should you find yourself shrouded in a thick mass of bloody infection. The infected are not easily dispatched, and staying true to the game's nature, every encounter you have with one of these wretched abominations yields just as good of a chance of death as survival. Never are the infected a nuisance, they're always a threat that the player must escape, and the idea of escape is persistent throughout the entirety of the game. Every feat the player overcomes feels like it was just barely achieved, keeping any cockiness at bay. You're not in power, and you never will be. It's tiresome but not boring, and it's not boring because the game conditions you to care. The Last of Us is, put simply, well designed. There's just too much technical, stylistic, and story-based complexity to be able to pick it apart entirely in a reasonable time span, and I'm not even going to try. There's definitely something to be said about the ambiguity of expressing emotions that one has to experience firsthand, though. Like, I don't want to be one of the lone survivors in a post-apocalyptic hell, but seeing a fully realized existence of one through the eyes of a fictional yet genuine character is just, it's cool. Everything mentioned here about the actual game can be looked at objectively from a design standpoint, but man, can a video game take you on an emotional roller coaster? Wow. It takes a lot for a game to be able to allow the player to look past their controller and step into purely fictional territory, as well as have an emotional presence there while playing. The Last of Us, as a project, feels complete. The more caring you are about your product, the more it will take on a life of its own, and I think it's safe to say that when I play The Last of Us, I get a small glimpse into the heads of everyone over at Naughty Dog. Alright, enough with that. Considering you've listened to what I have to say for like, however long, I want to hear what you have to say. Not just about The Last of Us, but about games as an experience. Where will we go from here? Just how real will games get? Do we even need to get more real? The future of the interactive medium is fairly uncertain, and as we can see from the past, there's a good chance we'll be completely wrong. I'd like to believe that's always going to be the case, because surprises are fun, and personally, I love to be kept guessing. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Check out People Like Zelda right here. Alright, enough with that. Considering you've listened to hear me talk, what did I just say?